Hi everybody, it's Stephen here for the Idiot Quilter, and today I'm going to do a little short little short project that came in this package right here. And what this is from my local sewing store, Ultimate Sewing in Oshawa, but it is the Stonehenge mitered block. And this is part of this year's Northcott Challenge, or the Row by Row Challenge, where various stores design a block using their latest line, the Solstice line of fabric, Stonehenge Solstice, which is a really nice line of fabric. And you put these together, and if you go around to different stores and collect these little kits, you'll be able to create a quilt when you're done. So this is the first one. I don't know if I'll collect many more or not, but I'm going to put this together. Now, the thing is, a couple things I've never done before. One, I think I've got my camera in a decent position so you can see my sewing machine. I will adjust it so you can in a minute. And I've never done any sewing on the Idiot Quilter section of my channel before, so who knows how this is going to turn out. So I'm going to get set up here. I'll do my cutting. I don't know if I have to do any cutting at all, but I need to read the instructions. I need to get my machine set up properly for this, and away we'll go. Okay, so I just read the instructions that came with it, and they're doing mitered corners, and I have never done mitered corners, so I have no idea how this is going to turn out. They provided you with a center block, a gold strip, and a green strip. So there's my center block, and there's my green strip, and there's my gold strip. Okay, and then it says sew the gold and green strip together using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Okay. Sew the gold and green strip together using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Okay, right off the bat, I have a problem. Do they want me to sew them end to end, or do they want me to sew them side by side? Well, let's read the next instruction. Divide this into 4 separate strips, each approximately 13.5 inches long. Sew each of these strips to the edges of the fussy cut center block using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Start and finish seam a 1/4 inch from each end, i.e. between the arrows on all 4 sides. Okay, so I'm assuming what they mean is when we stitch on all 4 sides, we're going to leave a 1/4 inch from the ends. Okay, that must have something to do with the mitering. Miter each corner and sew again using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Okay, now I think these are the instructions for mitering. Fold your block diagonally corner to corner with right sides together. Match up the borders that meet at the corner and pin along raw edges. Lay your ruler along the fold in the quilt top with the 45-degree mark on the ruler on the seam line you just sewed. Mark the border from the point at the corner out to the border edge. Begin sewing at this point, backstitch to secure, and carefully sew along your drawn line to the edge of the border. Sew slowly, removing pins as you go. Don't pull on your fabric as you're sewing on the bias. Take care to sew to the points where the featured strips meet. Backstitch to secure the ends at the edge of the border. Press the seam open and check the corner for accuracy before trimming seam to 1/4 inch. Trim your block to 12.5 inches square. Take care to center the fussy cut block and ensure all borders are identical in width. Okay, a picture would have been nice if this had been included with these instructions. Maybe this makes a lot of sense to people who have a lot more experience than I do, but right now it doesn't. So I'm going to start with the first thing, which says to sew the gold and green strip together using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Okay, this is where I'm confused. Do I sew them end to end or side to side? Okay, this is looks like a width of fabric length. So if I sew them end to end, oh, they're also not the same size. I have a feeling I'm supposed to sew the whole strip to make one panel, and then I cut each of these 13.5 inches long. That's what I think would mean. It's got to be, because how would you do it the other way. Wouldn't make sense. Okay, so I'm going to set up my sewing machine here and start that first process. Okay, so I've got my strips here together, putting right sides together, and I'm going to sew this long strip with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. I've got white thread in my machine and in my bobbin, and I just need to switch over to the 1/4 inch mark. Okay, and I've got my 1/4 inch foot in. Check my speed here. Oh, better get a little starter piece here, a little starter fabric, because you know what may happen with this if I don't do that. Okay, foot up, and here goes nothing. And I'm standing on my strip. Okay, let's get it up here. Line up my edges. I'm a little worried about doing the mitered corner business on here because I've never done mitered corners. But on the other hand, I do need to figure this out because I have this other quilt that I have all pieced, but I haven't, well, I've got the blocks made, but I haven't put them together yet. And it's a quilt that I did in a class called the Dynamic Quilt, I think it is, or I call it the Quilt from Hell. Because it's the one I think you've heard me mention before that had over 420 half square, 2-inch half square triangles in it. And once I get all the blocks put together, I do have to do a mitered corner border. And as I said, I have never done this before. And the instructor did show us what to do, but you know, that was a month and a half ago, and my memory's not very good. So maybe this will give me some practice in that. We'll see. I mean, worst case scenario, this doesn't work out. Well, it cost me $5 for the kit. It came with the fabric and, well, whatever. It's not the end of the world. But I'm hoping that will be able to figure out how to do miter corners from this, and that's going to be a great help when it comes to doing some serious work on that other quilt. So I'm almost finished sewing these 2 strips together. Just a little more to go. Okay, I've done that. So I've got all my pieces, or these 2 pieces, sewn together. So I guess I'm going to need to press the seam on this. Okay, and then I guess I cut this into 13.5-inch strips. Okay, divide this into 4 separate strips, each approximately 13.5 inches. Okay, so I'm going to go off, I'm going to press this and cut it. Okay, so I've cut each of those long strips into 4 pieces 3.5 inches long. Now, something interesting I discovered while I was doing this. I was using that as my straight edge at first on this long strip, but if you look at this closely, you can see that whoever cut these strips, they did not cut them straight. So I flipped it over and did it on this side, straighter side. And so I've got my strips here. Now, here's where we're getting tricky. This is where an actual picture of the block would have come in handy. It says to sew each of these strips to the edges of the fussy cut center block using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Okay, get that. Start and finish seam 1/4 inch from each end, i.e. between the arrows on the 4 sides. So we have this diagram right here, and with the arrows. So I'm assuming that we need to take each of these strips, and it doesn't say which edge of this should be put up with the block, so I could do it like this, but I think it'd be better with more of a contrast if I use the wider one on the inside. Now, I don't know if there's a rule for this when you've got basically two borders, if you should use a wider one on the inside and a more narrow one on the outside, or vice versa. I have no idea, but I think it would look better that way. But now, here's my problem. This block is not as long as these strips. So, if I'm supposed to leave a 1/4 inch in from each one of these corners as I put it on, then I would assume I should center this. So, from past videos, I know that what people do to find a center point is they'll fold their block in half and just finger press it so they get a center mark, and then fold the other piece. I've seen them do this with triangles when they're putting them on like something that's on point. So I'm assuming you would do the same thing here. I suppose you could eyeball it because you got a lot of material, I think, left over, but I'm going to do the fold. So I've done the fold. I know where my center is, and then I'll just line up the two center marks and sew a 1/4 inch, and I'll do that with each piece. So I'm going to do this with this first piece, so let me see what's going to happen here. Just review again. Okay, 1/4 inch seam allows it to start and finish with a 1/4 inch at each spot. Now, I'm not sure what a 1/4 inch is on each spot. I'm just moving the camera here so you can see what I'm doing. Sorry for the bounce. Okay, so maybe I should mark this a 1/4 inch in. So I'm going to need a ruler for that. And I don't happen to have a ruler handy. So, okay, so what I've done is I've located my 1/4 inch from either side here, and I marked it on the center piece, the fussy cut piece, but when I put this over top of it, I realized I can't see that mark, so I took a friction pen and I just lifted it up and looked and marked where the 1/4 inch is. So it says you're supposed to go from 1/4 inch to 1/4 inch, so let's put this in. I've got my 1/4 inch foot on, and I'm just going to put my needle down, my foot down, and sew, and see what happens. Okay, there I am. Cut the thread. Okay, so I've got this first piece on. I'm going to do the same for the other pieces. Now this is going to be in the way, so I guess I'm going to have to pull that back. Well, I know where the 1/4 inch there is, so I'm only going to have to mark a 1/4 inch on this one. So get my little ruler. I'm using this hemming ruler or whatever it's called, and I'm using a chalk pencil because this is a dark fabric, and I've got my 1/4 inch marked on here, so mark it on here. And I got to find the center of this, so I'll fold this piece over. I suppose this doesn't have to be that exact, but I'm trying to follow the instructions as they are. Take another strip of this, fold this in half, give it a good finger press. Oops, not very straight. Not very much in half. Okay. This is where fingernails, I think, come in really handy, which I don't have any. Okay. Now, let's just put it here, line up the center lines. And using my friction pen, I'll mark on the back of here the 1/4 inch mark. Okay. And let's sew this one on. Get everything lined up. Here we go. Okay, cut my thread. Okay, second piece is on. Okay, so far so good. Alright, let's, so I'm going to sew the other two pieces on using the same method, and then I'll be back. Okay, so now we're getting into the tricky stuff. I've got everything sewn on here, and the instructions say, fold your block diagonally, corner to corner, with right sides together. Match up the borders that meet at the corners and pin along raw edges. Okay. So we're supposed to fold this diagonally from corner to corner with right sides together. Okay. Match up the borders that meet at the corner and pin along the raw edges. Okay. So I guess they mean, I don't know what they mean. Okay. Pin along the raw edges. Okay, so that right there. Now I got this seam going on here, so let's see. The raw edges. On the raw edges. Okay, what does that mean? Match up the borders that meet at the corner and pin along raw edges. Okay. Well, that's a raw edge and that's a raw edge. Okay, I see. All right. So pin along the raw edges. All right. Pins. Pin along raw edges. Maybe another pin. I'm not sure if I know what I'm doing, people. That one pin's a little bent. Okay. I wonder if I need another one there. Actually, I have a feeling I shouldn't pin this way. First of all, this is a bent pin, so let's get rid of that. So it says pin along raw edges. Okay. Now this one's getting tucked a little bit under there, so I'm assuming, I don't know. I'm not sure how this is going to work. Okay, don't give up yet. Okay, match up the borders that meet at the corner and pin along the raw edges. Lay your ruler along the fold in the quilt top. Lay your ruler along the fold in the quilt tube with a 45-degree mark on the ruler on the seam line you just sewed. Mark the border from the point at the corner out to the border edge. Okay, so let's think about this. You lay your ruler along the fold in the quilt top. Along the fold. Is this the fold? In the quilt top with a 45-degree mark on the ruler on the seam line you just sewed. On the seam line, okay, this must be the seam line here. I wonder if I'm supposed to, okay, I got to think about this. I'll be back. Okay, I'm sorry I could not show you how I figured out how to make mitered corners. I could not figure them out from those instructions that came with this. They're not very well written instructions, okay? Second of all, I think those instructions were probably written for people who have done mitered corners before, and I never have. So I got frustrated with it, so I went to YouTube. I found a Fons and Porter video. It was called Mitered Corners on a Quilt Border. It's very good, it's very clear, it's only 5 minutes long, and they show you a really simple way to do it, and it's easy to follow. So I did that. Now, a couple of things though about this particular material that I have learned, okay? One of the things I've learned is this kind of fabric that's on here, I probably should have put that on the inside border, not on the outside, because when I squared this up, you can see it's not perfectly square because of the lines. If it had been this fabric on the outside, no problem. So live and learn. Don't do something that's got a design that has straight lines on it when you're trying to square this up, because it's not going to work. At least it doesn't work for me. But I now have a concept of how to do mitered corners, and they're not that scary. And for the most part, this was just a block, nothing big. It'll go into my abandoned block box and sit there for 1,000 years or whatever, until someday I might take all those abandoned blocks and make them into a quilt. So, as I said, if you want to figure out how to do mitered blocks, go to the Fons and Porter YouTube channel. That's listed as Mitered Corners for Borders, for Quilt Borders. Mitered Corners for Quilt Borders. And that will help you out. And they're not that scary. If you want to see the back, you press them open, and it lays pretty flat. So the only thing I'm disappointed in with this is just simply that I should have not put this fabric on the outside. I should have put it on the inside and put this fabric, the gold fabric, on the outside, and then things would look a little square when I squared it up. Okay, so that's me for the Idiot Quilter, and I hope you learned something from this video. See you next time. Bye-bye.